have to remark that I'm reminded of Sesame Street so far today, because we're here at Mobile World Congress, where mobile is everything, talking about Mobile Connect, and hearing from Marie and Marta and Mariana and Mike. So today, everyone is brought to you by the letter M. Yeah, Andrea, you have 15 minutes to change your name legally. Mariana can help you. I do run the NSTIC program in the US, and it's a strategy that's about 5 years old now. And we have a focus what I'm going to do today is really focus on how we interact publicly and privately, and how I see the similarities and differences between those two types of applications for digital identity. So first I want to conduct a brief thought experiment. So clear your minds of all other thoughts just for a moment. And believe this: achieving perfection in digital identity requires just 3 steps. 1. Oh, the animation's wrong, sorry. Build the perfect widget. 2, get everyone to use it. And 3A, there will be a 3B, expect that it will never break. Easy, right? I'm an economist, so I'm used to assuming all sorts of wild things. But even I have trouble assuming this. And so we cannot use this as our paradigm for building digital identity. We can have a step 3B, but it doesn't make it a whole lot better. Even if it does break, go back to step 1. So I think the best case is that this is recursive. The worst case is it's an infinite loop. And if you believe that we can actually do this and build the perfect widget and get everyone to use it and expect that it'll never break, you probably have a memory leak. And that it's just the way it is. It's the way life is. I've been working in information security field for about 7 years now. Not that long, but I was an environmental economist before that. It's not clear how that change happened. But if I've learned one thing, and one thing only, it is that it will break. And so everything we do, we have to do with the assumption that it is going to break. My fundamental assumption in terms of username and password is not that the username and password is in itself a horrible technology. It's that we implemented it in such a way that it is difficult to get rid of. And everything we should implement, we should be doing with the expectation that we will have to get rid of it because it will run its course. And frankly, this is true for something like Mobile Connect as well. So we have to create something where we have a possibility for Mobile Connect to continue evolving. We can still call it Mobile Connect, but in 15 years, it will probably be a very different solution. And that's OK. We have to be building things in such a way to do this. So I work at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and that's really why is we're focused on implementing this and leading it from a standards agency. Because we're very focused on measuring the quality of solutions and building standards around them to make them interoperable and make them work together. So I'm going to give you just the vision very quickly. It's a bit lengthy, but this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to establish a world in which individuals and organizations utilize secure, efficient, easy-to-use, and interoperable identity solutions to access online services in a manner that promotes confidence, privacy, choice, and innovation. There's an S there for utilize because I'm on this side of the pond, so you're welcome for that cultural sensitivity. So in our office, we measure progress very simply on 2 fronts: commercial adoption and federal adoption. And we affect change through standards, technology, and measurement science. I'm going to focus on commercial adoption and federal adoption today, but very quickly I'm going to get the standards and technology piece of it out of the way. For those that don't know, that's our standard reference, peanut butter. So we have standards for absolutely everything. You couldn't possibly imagine. You should go look up the manual, the list of all standard reference items. It's truly phenomenal. And our favorite one is peanut butter. This is a $700 jar of peanut butter by which all peanut butter is measured. So if you don't have the color or the texture properly created in your manufacturing plant, you cannot call it peanut butter. And so you need to have the standard reference peanut butter in order to know what to do with it. There's also a multi-day diet where they just take the diet and they put it in a blender and they dry it. And they just send you this powder of what the 4-day diet should be, and that's where you compare your caloric intakes. It's a wonderful place to work. There's also a plutonium reactor down the road from my building. So standard technology and measurement science. a couple of real quick things that I want to talk about that we do that many of the folks in the room that do follow the standards community will know about. NIST 863, Special Publication 863, is a document that we use. It is really the foundation for digital authentication in government. And we're currently updating that document. We're doing a lot of clarification around remote identity proofing and paving the way for the future and future-proofing the way that we're going to develop that document. One of the things we're really focused on in terms of this document and proofing actually is bringing it aligned more globally, and we work closely with our friends in the UK, especially in their good practice guides and their approach to identity proofing. Everything that we are doing these days in digital identity is about making sure that this is a global community that's functioning together and is interoperable. It has to. It's the only way we're going to get this right. Speaking of which, I'd like to make sure everyone in this room, the folks that work in the government space or near the government space, know about a working group in the Open Identity Foundation that we are chairing called the iGov Working Group. The idea here is to build a global profile of OpenID Connect for public services. So we currently have about 12 governments doing this. We needed to do it for our own use in the US federal government, and we decided, well, we could do it ourselves, we could do it in cooperation with the private sector, or we could actually throw it out to industry and try to make it global. And so we've taken that approach, and it's really taken off. So feel free to contact me or any contacts you have the OpenID Foundation to work in that. It really is making accessing public services far more interoperable using OpenID Connect. And then a real goal of ours is just about advancing standards for the market to meet market goals. It's really about measurability. So we're putting a lot of energy right now into the science of measurement. Really trying to figure out how can you measure the quality of an identity proofing solution? Because frankly, we are terrible at comparing different identity proofing solutions. It's very subjective as to whether we think one is better than another. We try and we do our best, but we're not as good as it. It's not a standard approach to measuring those solutions. Same with authentication. Is this biometric sensor better than this biometric sensor? We have testing for some approaches, especially within a mode, maybe comparing one fingerprint sensor to another, but certainly not very good standards in terms of comparing iris to fingerprint, to the use of a SIM card and security of a SIM card. We don't have these sorts of approaches, measurement approaches that we need, so we're putting a lot of energy into that. So now more of the focus here. I'm going to talk for a second about commercial adoption and then federal adoption, and then the differences and similarities between them. So we run a pilot program in our office. We currently have awarded 18 pilots. We're working to break Metcalfe's law. Metcalfe's law being the principle that the value of a network is proportional to the number of nodes that exist on it. This is the value of the 2 billion number, right? You have to get a lot of nodes on the market for it to be valuable enough for the service providers to pick it up. Start seeing those nodes, all of a sudden these things make economic sense, right? This is, people talk about the chicken and egg problem. This is about beating that problem, breaking it. Right? Someone said in a panel this week that they didn't like that question at all because obviously the egg came first, and the amount of passion with which they said that, I was absolutely amazed. So far we've impacted 2.3 million individuals. You can see the other numbers there. These are actually old numbers. We'll be updating in the next few weeks, and we expect those to have some substantial increases. So these are some pretty good direct impacts. We also have a lot of indirect impacts of our alumni, as we call them, pilots, and what they've done in the future and how they've moved forward. We also have this public-private partnership we started called the Identity Ecosystem Steering Group, the IDESG. 380 members of this group, public and private, almost entirely private. There's a couple dozen government members. And they're finalizing a self-attestation program and have released the Identity Ecosystem Framework, which is essentially just a set of requirements for doing a decent job of online identity. It's that simple. It's not supposed to be about changing the world. It's supposed to be about being able to really brand someone as doing a good job and allowing them to come forward and make an attestation that says, we follow these requirements. We do things right in decent way in terms of privacy and in terms of security. It's really about setting a baseline so that you have somewhere that you can look and know that there's a reasonable approach being taken by this organization. And that's the brand that the IDESG is working to build. So that's currently publicly released. The self-attestation program associated with it should be released either end of May, early June. So now let's look at federal adoption. In federal adoption, we have in the US something called Connect.gov. It's a hub architecture. And it has some interesting privacy technology built into it. So essentially, if you're a US agency, You can accept commercial authentication from a commercial provider for an individual, but you have no idea who that commercial provider is. You're technically blinded from seeing who the commercial provider is. You, as a commercial provider, be it Verizon or Google or whomever, can provide those credential services to an agency, and you don't know what agency the individual went to. You just know that they went to the US federal government. And there's pairwise pseudonymity for the agencies as well, so it's actually impossible for an agency to go to another agency and find out whether an individual has ever been there. So we've greatly reduced the ability for government tracking, not through policy, but through technical means. And that's one of the things we really focus on doing in our program, is moving things that we can do privacy right via policy, but it is much better to do it via technology where possible. And so that's really where we focused. The FICAM, and I'm going to throw out some real government-y things here, but there's a point to it all, so I will go quickly through these next two bullets. The Federal Identity Credential and Access Management Program has a sub-program called the Trust Framework Adoption Process, Trust Framework Provider Adoption Process, the TFAP. It's a silent P, the first one for some reason. So this is really about streamlining processes, getting the community together that could provide services, credential services to the federal government, and allowing them to provide this process by which they can make determinations on what is acceptable policy and what makes sense and how should we conduct auditability and certification, those sorts of things. The next piece of this is trust framework solutions and the guidance that we write at NIST. So really this is about the federal policy. These are about the rules of the road, the actual requirements that are necessary in the federal government. So I'm going to go over this again. So what we've got here is commercial adoption and federal adoption. In commercial adoption, we have piloting solutions, we have organizing for policy, and we have framework and guidance for trust and interoperability. On the federal side, we have piloting solutions, organizing for policy, and framework and guidance for trust and interoperability. They're the same. We're doing the same things in government as we're doing in the commercial space. It sounds completely obvious, right? But we pretend all the time that, well, government's this very different use case and we do very different things in government. I simply don't believe that that's true. And so I think that there are some ground truths about how we do digital identity in the world. The first is that there are some applications that require strong authentication and that require effective identity proofing. Taxes, for instance, a government application. Healthcare, depending where you are, maybe a government application, maybe a private application. Banking, generally private applications, and plenty of others where you really do need to conduct identity proofing. Then there's another class of interactions that may require strong authentication, but does not require identity proofing. This is some modest payment transactions. The merchant actually doesn't need to know anything about who you are for an online transaction. They just need to know that you've successfully authenticated to the payment provider, right? And so you need fairly strong authentication because money's changing hands. You don't need the identity proofing behind that. And these sorts of interactions, those sorts of things can be either public, it could be with government as well, buying simple things from government, buying standard reference peanut butter, for instance, from the government. We don't need to know who you are that's buying it. You should be able to buy it no matter who you are, but we want to have strong authentication to make sure that you are in fact using a valid payment card. And then there's another class that requires minimal authentication, and we shouldn't forget about this. If you want to use a username and password for your blog, feel free. I don't think that's what users will choose when they have other options available, but we shouldn't just eliminate any class of solutions out of hand. If it's appropriate for the transaction from a risk perspective, hey, let the user use it if they want to. So no identity proofing is necessary for these sorts of things as well. There is no point in putting identity proofing on it because we're weakly authenticating. So the identity proofing is not worth anything anyway because someone else could spoof it. So blogs and listservs, traditional media, going to read a newspaper site and having your preferences saved or your favorite articles, who cares? Identity proofing is not necessary, and if someone hacks into my New York Times account and messes with my favorite articles, what does it matter? I don't need strong authentication. I want convenient authentication, but I don't need strong authentication. And then most social media is the same way, but not all. So if we think about these as the ground truths, the reality is that there isn't a whole lot of differentiation between government applications and private applications. All of these, they hold regardless of whether they're public or private. From my view, there is an ideal steady state. And I very intentionally say steady state and not solution, because there is not steadiness in the solutions. It's a volatile solution set, and it always should be. We should be focused on evolution, Our goal should be evolution in the entire digital identity marketplace. So it's not about a single solution or even a single provider of solutions, in my view. I do think there are places where it makes sense for government to issue identity, for sure. And there may be places where it makes sense for government to be the broker of all identity, and those often are political and cultural, in addition to being economic. It's not necessarily the case. We don't have the requirement for it, and I don't think we need to. I think we can build the solutions whatever the choice is from that perspective. So the NSTIC then is really about a marketplace of solutions, fostering a healthy, vibrant marketplace of solutions. When something breaks, it can go away. When a new solution emerges, it should have the opportunity to get a foothold. This is how we describe every healthy market everywhere else in the world, and we shouldn't pretend that digital identity is different just because of that personal aspect of it being about me. We should really expect that this is the case. And then the goal then for us is very much so to not build the perfect widget, and we should never be thinking about that. We should build the best product that we can, but we need to get it out to the market, and we need to expect that it will be broken. It's going to be broken, and we'll need to get rid of it. And so we have to have this ability for this evolutionary state. That is why what we do, we run this program out of NIST, because it really, from our perspective, is about getting these things right about the solutions that we really need, getting the privacy conditions right, getting the interoperability is what really makes it the glue, what really will make the whole thing stick so that we don't have to write another national strategy. Even if we executed perfectly and got this done, we'd need to write another national strategy in 10 years. We need to go do it all over again. And in that interim period, we've got solutions that are broken. So what we're really trying to do is future-proof and really move towards that sort of model where we don't ever have to write another strategy again, because it just works. It's just a market that works. So I'll talk just for a second about mobile. The reality here is that I am very much ambivalent about what types of solutions or where they come from. But there are characteristics of solutions that we're looking for. Ubiquity. So customers and constituents want access to services when and where they want. Mobile probably checks that box. It really is that ubiquity is a goal, so you have to leverage it wherever you can, however you can. I've already got multiple phones, sitting over there in my chair that I usually am no farther than this from, and I know when they're missing. It gives me a little anxiety to be farther than this. So there's no single solution, but there certainly are solutions that have more promise than others. And I think when we just think about the characteristics of mobile devices and the type of authentication and the type of knowledge that network operators already have about who these individuals, what any individual is, that it's really a lot of the characteristics we need are baked in. And so it's up to the users to choose if they want to leverage MNOs or not. But it's a very strong bet that there'll be a role to play for mobile for the foreseeable future in this market. And that's all I have. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take some questions.